welcome to this history news, and I'm coming from a very salubrious location indeed. Thank you very much. Sarah sent in today's background image. I'm going to say our hellos first, but while that's going on, can anybody tell us, not Sarah because you sent it, where we are today, where I have been transported to? In the meantime, let's say some hellos. I'm seeing that lots of people are going to be checking out the eclipse. Alas, it's dark here, so no eclipse for us. We're missing it. And I hope it's going to be an excellent experience for everybody. I hope everyone's got their appropriate goggles for looking at things. Don't look at it directly with your eyeballs. Hi, Kathleen. It's lovely to have you. Thank you for joining. Thank you so much. Happy Eclipse Day to you in Denver. Thank you. Jessie's got a live stream going, so you can follow the totality as it moves across the country. That's so cool. Hi, Shane. Yes. If you're part of my mailing list, you would have seen the email that I put out and talked about how my husband did a whole event for the kids over Easter holidays, and it was a really good time. And somebody did bring these incredible, I think I'm going to call them biscuits. They're sort of like a dipped shortbread, and they may have been originally from a Czech shop, but I've never seen them before, and they are delicious. They're like a coat in a kind of vanilla solid icing. It's almost like a white chocolate, but it's vanilla flavored. It was very delicious. And yes, it's all because my husband likes to throw an Easter egg hunt for the kids that live around us. So my little boy has the time of his life because a lot of his friends from nursery live in our little area. So they all came over, and the bigger kids as well. And he was just running around happy as a clam, he was. Hi, Steve. Thanks for joining. And Stuart, good evening to you too. Marcus, I'm going to assume by your name. Hello, brother Marcus. I'm going to go with that. Hello, Christina. Welcome. I'm glad. It's lovely to have new people. You are very welcome. Thank you. Oh, that's very kind of you, Fluffy Monkey. I grew it out of my head and I gave it a wash yesterday. So that is why it's down. Also because it's getting a bit long. And when I wear it up, it makes my brains hurt. So I've given up on that. Now then, has anybody guessed where we are yet? Anybody going to guess where we are? Haven't seen anybody coming in to say where we are. Well, I'm coming to you from the background image of the Church of Sagrada Familia, which is in Barcelona. And this is yes, Barcelona, exactly. Although they may debate that, so we won't say that. Oh, Steve, yes, you did. You got Barcelona. You did spot. We are in Barcelona. Absolutely. The Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. It is beautiful, isn't it? And I think Sarah's took an incredible picture. I love the way the light's coming in. It's so cool. Jennifer is going to Edinburgh tomorrow. Any recommendations? Well, depending on the sort of things you're into, the kind of catacombs under the city are really interesting. Some of them they do kind of ghostify them. It depends on whether you enjoy that sort of thing or not. And Edinburgh Castle is fabulous. I mostly know Edinburgh for the Fringe. So what's around Edinburgh to me is where all the Fringe venues are. But as we're not in August, that is less useful to you. But if anybody else has got any tips for Edinburgh, please pop them in the comments for Jennifer. So thank you all for joining this live. If you are here live, I'm very grateful. And if you are watching on the playback, thank you for that as well. We have got some updates, some repatriation / decolonization news. We've got some new news. We have a ding dong, and we do also have some events and exhibitions. I am still having problems with the opera pinboard. It's not letting me do pinboard things. So we are once again reliant upon only the articles that are listed and numbered in the description box. You will notice that at the bottom of the slides that'll be on screen soon, there is a number that correlates to the news item that I'm talking about, which is in the numbered list in order in the description box. So hopefully that will be helpful to you. I want to say a massive thank you, and I will in a moment, to everybody who sent me articles. A lot did come in, and I'm looking forward to sharing them all with you. I think that is all of the orders of business I have before we jump in. So without further ado, let's start with the thank yous. This is for people who sent me articles. Thank you so much to Shane, to Alicia, to Steve, to Kathy, Yvonne, to my name twin cat, to Rebecca, Elaine, Kelly, Elverta, Jessie, to Beth, Sarah, Mary, to Amy, to Felem, Katharine, Joseph, Joe, and Pandora Snudpuckle. I'm very grateful, as always, that people, when they're out and about in their daily lives, they spot a history news item and they think of me. That's very flattering. And then they also, on top of that, take the time to send it over. So I am incredibly grateful for anybody who does do that. Thank you very much. Scarlett, you sent me one on Twitter. I did not see your name pop up, and I didn't check my DMs. So hopefully somebody else has sent it as well. Let us hop in with the updates first. The British Museum has got a court order against that ex-curator who has allegedly perpetrated the thefts. This is about, we talked about this a lot, about all of those things that were sold on eBay, etc. His name is Peter Higgs. This is the museum's curator of ancient Greek collections and the acting head of the Greece and Rome department. He was sacked after these alleged thefts came to light. He's currently under police investigation, but has apparently not been charged. So what's happened is the British Museum has now filed a civil lawsuit against him, and he in turn has filed a defence, which shows he's intending to dispute the claim. The museum's lawyer, Daniel Burgess, in the court document said, while the full extent of the theft is unknown, it's presently believed that over 1,800 items were stolen or damaged, and many hundreds of them were sold or offered for sale by Higgs. The lawyer added that Higgs tried to, quote, cover his tracks by, among other things, using false names, creating false documents, and manipulating records held on the museum's IT system. The British Museum has so far had 356 items returned so far. The judge in the case has granted the museum an order requiring Higgs to return items he may still have and to provide information about the whereabouts of missing items or their proceeds. So we will see, presumably, if he's sold them, he has to admit he's sold them, he will have records of where they've gone, because particularly if they've gone through eBay, you get sent the address of the person who's bought it. We shall see where this goes. I do think it's interesting that there haven't been criminal charges filed yet, which is I am quite surprised by that he's under police investigation but has not been charged. This was a while ago. I suppose they are perhaps still gathering evidence, I'm guessing. We will see. Oh, Alicia, you've had a notification that my emails are getting sent to spam, wondering if anybody else is having the same issue. Yes, I have heard about this. I thought I had it covered off because I set up an email that wasn't a Gmail in the hopes that would route around the spam filters. There's been a kind of update in spam filters. So if you are being sent something through a Gmail, it's supposed to flag it and send it to spam. I am not sending it through Gmail, but it still seems to be doing it. So if you haven't seen an email from me for a while, I do send them out once a week. Maybe just check your spam folder and say that I'm an approved source, and hopefully it will find its way to you. Next up, this is interesting. The University of Harvard has removed the human skin binding from a book. The book is De Destinée de l'Homme. This is from the Houghton Library. Ethical concerns were raised about the book's origin and its history, I think specifically the skin on the book. The French physician, Dr. Ludwig Boulan, quote, bound the book with skin he took without consent from the body of a deceased female patient in a hospital where he worked. Wild. Bouland included a handwritten note inside stating that, quote, a book about the human soul deserved a human covering. Well, that's all right then. Wild. The also detail was the process behind preparing the skin for binding. It rubs the lotion on the skin or else it gets the hose again. This removal was prompted by a library review following the University of Harvard's report on human remains in its museum collection. The, quote, Harvard Library and Harvard Museum Collections Return Committee concluded that the human remains used in the book's binding no longer belong in the Harvard Library collections due to the ethically fraught nature of the book's origin and subsequent history. Apparently, the removed skin, this is just... So, do you know when you read something and you think to yourself, that sometimes I wish I didn't know a thing. Like, obviously, I was aware that there were books bound in human skin. That's, that kind of apocrypha is stuff that does the rounds. And I've always found it troubling and concerning. But somehow, when the reasoning is it's a book about the human soul, so it needs a human skin, that logic is somehow worse for me, and I don't know why. It shouldn't be, really. It's all gross, but it is. So the removed skin is now in secure storage at Harvard Library. Because, I mean, really, what else can you do with it? Apparently, the library is going to conduct additional research. The patient from whom the skin was taken is anonymous. So they are working with French authorities to determine a, quote, final respectful disposition, it said. So I don't know if there's going to be an update on that. If there is, I'll share it. Oh, yes, sorry. I probably should have flagged this. That slide was a no eating slide. Sometimes it gets like that in the history news. And I also, Marcy, I don't show human remains on this channel. I believe in some of these news items dealing with this book, you might see photographs or even video of the book. I don't put stuff like that on my channel because I don't feel comfortable about further sharing without somebody's consent an image of their human remains, particularly when I do make money from my channel. Those are reasons why I don't do it. So it is worth remembering that if I put a news item on this channel and it mentions human remains, but you don't see them on the slide, that's almost certainly because I have chopped them out of the bit of the article that I've put on the slide. So, yes. Scarlett, it does get interesting around here sometimes. And this feels almost Halloween-y, doesn't it? It does feel... It feels... I'm pleased it's been removed. I'm glad there's going to be a question about how to respectfully dispose or deposit, bury, lay to rest these remains. But my goodness, what an awful thing to happen, I think. We've got an update on that holy grail of shipwrecks, This is the one that Colombian authorities, they have a plan to lift the cargo. This is an 18th century galleon thought to be carrying gold, silver, and emeralds worth billions. Indigenous communities in Bolivia, however, are calling on Spain and UNESCO to step in to halt this project from happening. Colombia wants to begin recovering artifacts from the wreck of the San Jose in the coming months, but a group of Caranga, Chiquita, and Quilaca peoples from Bolivia say that the galleon and its contents should be considered, quote, common and shared patrimony. Now, I don't know what that means, and I'm only basing my understanding of it. That's clearly a legal term, and I am not a legal expert. So whatever I say about this is how this newspaper article is reporting it. So if that definition of common and shared patrimony is wrong, then I'm sorry, but it's not my fault. it's the article writer's fault. Blame them. The reason, so we are told that a substantial part of this treasure that's on board the ship is thought to have been mined using the forced labor of these indigenous peoples in Bolivia. So the thought being that the Colombian government's plans to lift the remains without the consent of the descendants is a violation of international law. Quote, not having our consent, our participation, without taking into account how it will impact the present and future of our communities is irresponsible and contrary to justice. We do not have the right to forget, and nor does Spain or any of the American republics have the right to erase or change our memory. The San Jose, we're told, has got an immense bounty of gold, silver, and emeralds. It was bringing it back from Latin America to Spain in 1708, when it was sunk by a British fleet off the coast of Cartagena. The announcement was made in February, we talked about it then, that they were soon going to begin exploring the shipwreck in the hopes of eventually building a museum dedicated to the vessel. I think in a way they were sort of presenting it as a Mary Rose for the Colombian or the Spanish as well, like a shared exhibition. The Bolivian indigenous communities argue that Colombia does not have the right to explore the San Jose without including the descendants of those who mined the precious metals which went into the treasures on board. The communities have requested that Spain and UNESCO intervene before Colombia can begin unilaterally lifting the remains of the wreck from the seabed. Quote, we think that extracting important fragments of that era from the bottom of the ocean is like discovering an island, and on that island live our memories and the objects that the work of our ancestors created. They continue. So the exclusion of indigenous communities in the discussion of the fate of the San Jose was, we are told, inexplicable. That's from Jose Maria Lancho, who is a lawyer in Madrid who's representing these indigenous groups in Bolivia. He says, quote, we have enough rights, enough historical experience, and I want to believe enough morals to be able to accept and accommodate the claims of those communities. Intervening in the site without the consent of these people would be a form of plunder. Spain and Colombia were missing out on a, quote, historic opportunity for reconciliation. As of yet, the Colombian Ministry of Culture has not commented on the letter, but said they'd invited another indigenous community, the Cara, to participate in its plans to explore the ship's remains. While the Caranga, Chiquita, and Quilaca lay claim to the San Jose treasure on the grounds that their ancestors were forced to dig up and process the silver, the Cara lay claim to the archaeological treasures through their rights to the land. So I don't think this is going to be over soon. But as and when if we get a ruling or any further developments, I will, of course, update you. Steve, there seems to be a global idea from governments they are not subject to international laws. Disappointing. I mean, particularly, they don't think they're subject to international laws when they are dealing with populations and demographics who perhaps don't have the clout or sway to, I don't know, actually embargo them, for example. I think that they wouldn't they wouldn't try and dance this dance with a government of a nation with whom they wanted a trade deal, for example, or something else. Oh, sorry, I poked that by accident. Talking about your getting your total eclipse glasses out. Very good, people. Somebody's going to try a welder's helmet. I mean, I'm not going to say, I don't know if that's safe or not. This is not medical advice from me. Our next and final update is the following. A Ukrainian museum claims to have identified 100 looted artworks that they have seen in a Russian propaganda video. This is Ukraine's Curzon Art Museum. We have talked about this in previous discussions about looting. They have claimed that they've seen these works that were allegedly looted from its collection that is now being shown in a propaganda video for which has been itself shot in the Crimean Museum. The museum wrote on social media, quote, "Looters document their crimes with their own hands. This allows us to determine the whereabouts of at least some of the stolen art." 99 of the 100 identified works are believed by the museum to be in Crimea, a Black Sea peninsula that was illegally annexed from Ukraine by Russia in 2014. Ukraine and its allies do not recognize Russian sovereignty over Crimea. Among the works identified is Fisherman on the Seashore, which is from 1932 by Ivan Shula, a renowned graphic designer, educator, and painter. Also, Daughter of Guzul, which is from 1967, a watercolorist by watercolorist Venera Taikeva. There's also a 1967 oil painting by Yefrem Zirkov. So lots of things. The art museum, the Curzon Art Museum, said that 3 additional oil paintings by Ksenia Stetskenko, Anatoly Plotnov, and Antonin Formetsev, previously included among the thousands of artworks removed by the Russian military from Ukrainian museums under the guise of so-called evacuation, have also been spotted on the video. The Curzon Art Museum wrote, quote, "Every painting, every graphic work, every piece of artwork, everything we identify is indisputable proof that the stolen works, at least these, are in the hands of Russian art looters. And to prevent the criminals from saying they weren't here, as is their habit, we are recording everything we see in the photos and videos from Crimea and Henshek." In Mariupol, one of the first cities occupied in the invasion, a trove of prized Scythian gold dating back to the 4th century BCE was stolen. We have talked about that already. Ukrainian politicians have decried these incidents as an attack on their national identity. Russia's also been accused of violating the 1954 Hague Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the event of armed conflict. This prohibits the signatories from any form of theft of cultural property. Russia and Ukraine are both signatories to that treaty. So, we'll see where that goes. Just adding to the list, it's brilliant that these can be kept track of. And so when hopefully the time comes to make restitution of things, they will know where this stuff is. Into repatriations and decolonisation, the British Museum again, this time they're being investigated over Ethiopian artefacts that are apparently hidden from view for 150 years. A watchdog is examining claims that key details have not been disclosed about altar tablets that the museum is facing calls to return. The information watchdog is investigating the British Museum over claims it has been secretive about some of the most sensitive items in its collection, namely a group of sacred Ethiopian altar tablets that have been hidden from view for more than 150 years. There's 11 of them made of wood and stone. The British Museum acknowledges that they were looted by British soldiers after the Battle of Magdala in 1868. They have never been on public display, and they are considered to be so sacred that even the institution's own curators and trustees are forbidden from examining them. Which, again, if if the sacredness of them is such that they are unexaminable by anybody connected to the institution, how are they preserving them? How are they doing restoration work or preservation work on them? If you can't examine them, so what, they're just mouldering away in a basement? What? Weird. There have long been calls for them to be returned to Ethiopia, unsurprisingly. In 2019, the country's culture minister, when visiting the museum, requested their return. Now, a complaint has been submitted by campaigners to the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, arguing that the museum has failed to disclose key details of internal discussions about the tablets in response to a Freedom of Information request. We're told Returning Heritage, which is a not-for-profit organisation that collates information on cultural restitution, submitted the FOI, Freedom of Information request, in August 2023. And they say that the museum's reply omitted relevant material. This is like botching the FOI. This is like getting Capone for tax evasion. This is whatever works, while other information was overly redacted. An internal museums review carried out at Returning Heritage request upheld its initial response. The organisation argues that while the British Museum Act of 1963, the one that bans the disposal of objects except in very limited circumstances, means the status of other disputed artefacts is ambiguous, they say that this would not prevent these tablets from being lawfully returned now. Returning Heritage Managing Editor Lewis McNaught said the Act is very explicit that the museum can't return objects, but there are some legal exemptions within the Act, and one of those exemptions allows the trustees to return certain items if they consider them, quote, unfit to be retained. And I would argue that if they can't be displayed and they can't be examined, and thus presumably they can't be preserved, protected properly, or if needs be reconstructed, then they aren't, by definition, fit to be retained in this museum context. If none of those things can happen with them, then they aren't fit to be retained. Surely. Returning Heritage requested information from meetings where trustees discussed the tablets, which it believes could provide insight into why they believe they cannot lawfully be returned. Quote, it seems very strange the museum would not wish to explain why they're holding on to objects they can return. He argues there was, quote, a genuine public interest with this unique group of objects that can be returned. In understanding why the museum will not explain why they're not returning them. Westminster Abbey last month said it had agreed in principle that a single tablet that had been sealed inside a cathedral altar should be returned to Ethiopia. Another was returned soon after it was discovered in a church cupboard in Edinburgh 23 years ago. Tom Short, who's from the law firm Lee Day, submitted the ICO complaint on behalf of Returning Heritage, believing that the museum wrongly relied on certain permitted exemptions to FOI as a justification for withholding material. The British Museum has currently declined to comment. It's previously said that long-term ambition is to lend the tablets to an Ethiopian Orthodox Church in the UK, although clerics have questioned the feasibility of this due to the insurance costs. The ICO has confirmed that it received the complaint. There's a lot weird in there. It's not the first time I've heard about these Ethiopian tablets. I think we may potentially have talked about them previously in some respect. It is weird that it's not that weird, but it's again poor choice, poor management to botch the FOI in a way that can be legally challenged. That's a silly mistake. That's a you're taking the wrong advice from the wrong people. So a lot of people everyone seems to be sort of agreeing that they need to go back. I will not pretend to understand what's going on there and how it's possible they can justify keeping them. But as and when there are any further developments, I will, of course, let you know. Next up, perhaps you've spotted some of this. The Marchioness of Cholmondeley, Rose Hanbury, her marital home, Houghton Hall, is under fire because there are some suggestions that in a photo shoot that was done there, looted Chinese artifacts are in the background. These accusations are following scrutiny towards artifacts in the Marquess of and Marchioness of Cholmondeley's grand residence. The residence has approximately 106 rooms. It's one of the most magnificent mansions, which I'm sure they pay the full inheritance tax. However, upon looking at these photos, TikTok users in China targeted Houghton Hall, saying the historic estate harbours treasures that were taken during China's last imperial dynasty. The Marcus David Cholmondeley and his wife Rose Hanbury faced criticism for allegedly possessing, quote, pillaged loot acquired from the Baghdadi Jewish Sassoon family, renowned as, quote, the Rothschilds of the East. The Marquis is a descendant of this family. The origins of certain objects do remain uncertain, but a TikTok user posted interior pictures of Houghton Hall, suggesting ties to the Sassoon's wealth accumulation through looting in late Qing China. The response from Houghton Hall reads as follows. Quote, the items of Chinese origin in the photographs to which you refer were purchased by the Walpole family, the original owners of Houghton during the 18th century mid-Qing dynasty, mostly through agents rather than in China directly. The items were not looted, but mostly made for export to Europe. It would be hard to find a country house collection, whether private or owned by the National Trust, that does not exhibit items acquired in or from China. This is true of most European and American collections. This is a spokesman speaking to the Daily Mail. Now, what I will say is that I've seen the photographs, but I am absolutely by no means anywhere close to being an expert on where those things, what the differentiation would be between China ware produced for export and looted items from China. To be clear, what this person is saying is not beyond the realms of possibility. The China mania, if you will, or the passion for chinoiserie is definitely something that is well and truly enforced by the 18th century. People are fascinated, and entire ships are coming back just loaded with China for sale in the European and certainly in the English market. Houses are absolutely packed with this exported China ware. So this is entirely possible. However, without knowing the difference really between how these items should look, and without being a specialist in it, I don't know if that's the case. We will see. I'm sure we've not heard the end of it, because if there is any background to it, no doubt we will hear more about it. But people were certainly fascinated by collecting these kinds of objects and items from before this too. So we'll see. As and when updates come in, I will let you know. This is interesting. Artworks by a Jewish artist have been returned to Paris 80 years after going missing. We are talking about 48 artworks that have been discovered, we're told, in highly mysterious circumstances in 2022. They now are going to make their new home at the Museum of Jewish Art and History in Paris. The chance discovery brought to light the work of the artist Ari Arkady Lokachov, who died from malnutrition in 1941 after being forced to hide in a Jewish ghetto in Nazi-occupied France. These paintings and prints were found spread out in display on an abandoned bench in Crane Cove Park, which is in San Francisco. The Port of San Francisco employee, Jermaine Joseph, who stumbled on the artworks, alerted his colleagues, including the special project analyst Ariana Cunha. They began inspecting the items, seeing how nicely framed they were, how in some cases they were fixed in place by stones. They also saw they were signed. At the offices, a name was pieced together by the signatures and they found the artist's name. They then launched an amateur art historical investigation and found a few mentions of one Jewish artist who could be a match. It was found that this artist was born in 1892 into a cultured Jewish family and in a land that was part of the former Russian Empire. After he died in 1941, his work was sold at auction. The most perplexing question is how and why nearly 50 of his works turned up in San Francisco in 2022. There were apparently some stickers on some of the frames indicating they had been bought from a store in Huntsville, Alabama. And while the artist did not have a family, it's possible a friend or associate gathered the large collection of his work after his death, and then they ultimately emigrated to the US. The Port of San Francisco resolved earlier this year to transfer the 48 paintings to the museum in Paris, and they're going to travel there after they've been on public view in San Francisco. And at the Museum of Jewish Art and History and the institution, the practice of this artist is going to be carefully preserved. It's going to be further researched and also repositioned alongside the artist's forebears and contemporaries. So how they ended up just laid out abandoned on a bench, all 48 of them, weird to me. Odd choice, but good they are going to be on display and preserved and protected. I've put this in repatriations because I feel like that's the appropriate place to put it. Volunteers have uncovered the fate of thousands of lost Alaskans who were sent to an Oregon mental hospital a century ago. We are told that Lucy Pitka McCormick's relatives cooked salmon, moose, beaver, and muskrat over an earthen fire pit on the banks of the Chena River just outside Fairbanks as they honoured her life. They whipped whitefish, blueberries, and lard into a traditional Alaska native dessert and dolloped servings onto a paper plate, setting it in the flames to feed her spirit. They prayed as McCormick's great-grandson built a small plywood coffin filled with gifts and necessities for the next world, such as her granddaughter's artwork and a hairbrush. McCormick was one of about 5,500 Alaskans who, between 1904 and the 1960s, were committed to a hospital in Portland, Oregon, after being deemed by a jury, quote, really and truly insane. This was a criminal offence, seemingly. There were no facilities to treat those with mental illness or developmental disabilities in what was then the Alaska Territory, and so they were sent, often by dog sled, sleigh, or stagecoach, to a waiting ship in Valdez. The journey ended 4,000 kilometers away at Morningside Hospital. Many never left, and their families never know their fate. They are known, apparently, as the Lost Alaskans. For more than 15 years, volunteers have been working to identify the people who were committed to the hospital, and many of whom were buried in Portland cemeteries, some in unmarked pauper graves. A few, like McCormick, have been returned to Alaska for proper burials. A new database went online in February to help families see if their long-lost auntie or great-grandfather was among those sent to Morningside. The website, which builds on an earlier blog, is a clearinghouse for research performed by the volunteers. So if you think that this information might be useful to you, please do go to this website. It seems that there is a clickable link, new database, that will take you where you need to go. The volunteers became history detectives in an investigation that has spanned more than 15 years. Among them is a former Alaska Health Commissioner, Karen Perdue, 2 retired state judges, 2 other Fairbanks residents, and a cemetery volunteer in Portland. They said they found a wealth of information about other Morningside payment requests. They found that one person found her uncle on a patient trust account, showing the federal government owed him a few cents. The entry provided his patient number, which they used to uncover more about him, including that it was the village nuns who had him committed. Quote, he was mildly what we would call developmentally disabled today. He could read and write, but had few life skills. Apparently, there are several thousand names in the new database, with more names and details being added. Users might be able to find when and why a patient was committed, when they left or died, burial location, and a death certificate. This hospital was founded in the late 19th century. In 1904, it received a government contract to care for mentally ill Alaskans, a contract that lasted until after Alaska gained statehood in 1959 and began to build its own mental health facility. Parents would sometimes frighten their children into behaving by mentioning the hospital. Inside, outside, Morningside became a common phrase denoting people could stay in Alaska, move away, or be committed. In January 1931, we're told that McCormack's aunt, Fairbanks furrier Helen Callahan, claimed she was insane and was admitted into Morningside in 1930. Then, the following year, doctors performed a hysterectomy. McCormack died within weeks from a post-surgical infection. We're told on a beautiful fall day, relatives launched 4 boats on the Yukon River to take her to her birthplace in the village of Ramport. They were escorted by eagles and swans, like a salute to Grandma Lucy, he said. She was laid to rest on a hill overlooking the village of 29 people and a river. Quote, don't ever give up hope and try and get them back where they belong. Their spirits don't rest until they're found and brought back home. So if you think this might be useful to you, or if you can indeed help, then please do check this all out. The understanding, so Scarlett says, surely that's an illegal unaliving. I hate the fact that we have to use algo speak, but I'm going to use it. The enforced treatment of somebody who has been legally diagnosed as incompetent due to mental illness or defect at this time. For some people, there are all sorts of weird and terrible treatments that go on, and I don't know whether the hysterectomy was deemed medically necessary to treat the mental health issue, or if it was deemed medically necessary for another actually physiological reason. Unfortunately, infection risk is real, even with the best of intentions. So, while yes, these people should have been left alone, I think that you'll be hard pressed to criminally charge. We have a Colorado auction house rebuffing pleas from Mexico to halt the sale of Mayan artifacts, covering themselves in glory there. A Colorado auction house has apparently sold some historical artifacts from Mexico at a recent auction, despite pleas from the country's government to cancel the sale. So even a government can't control this. The pieces were referred to as items that belonged to the culture of Mexico. Quote, there is nothing more immoral than putting a price on the heritage of a nation. The auction caught the attention of Mexico's First Lady. She wrote in Spanish in a post on social media that the pieces were, quote, illegally stolen from our territory. Items available for sale included a rare pair of matched Mayan ear flares, each depicting a kneeling figure, listed for a buy now price of $5,737.50. Provenance listed as coming from a private collection in Hawaii. Don't think that's where it originally came from, though, is it, babe? Quote, all items legal to buy, sell under US statute covering Cultural Patrimony Code 2600 or 2600, Chapter 14, and are guaranteed to be as described or your money back, the listing says. Something about that makes my skin creep. There was a slate mirror seeking a $15,000 sale price. Quote, wow, a marvelous slate mirror. A marvelous slate mirror back, or Tezcatlipoca, apologies for that pronunciation, of discoid form adorned with the inlaid image of a lord in anthracite jade and greenstone. There was also a stucco portrait of a royal Mayan woman, a Mayan jadeite pendant, a redware effigy of a dog, a polychrome pottery jar. This was apparently described as a, quote, Titanic example of such ceramics. I don't really know what that means. Does it mean massive or does it mean disastrous? Who knows? Makes me wish that curses on sacred objects was real. We are told that dealers are obligated to operate under a variety of US laws and international conventions surrounding the sale of historic artifacts to combat looting. The 1970 UNESCO Convention was cited as one such agreement. Quote, we are told the auction house is called Artemis, and one of the co-owners said, just because a country says you cannot sell this doesn't mean what we and other dealers sell is illegal. It's not. Reporting should be based on facts, not accusations by a government that doesn't want to acknowledge US laws apply for business doing business in the US. There we go. When presented with the idea that critics may be concerned with the ethics of such sales beyond their legality, Bob Dodge, the other co-owner, said that humans have been collecting art for more than 10,000 years. Bob, for some of that time, they were also collecting and trading in people. So let's not. Legal and moral, different things, very different things. Civilizations such as the ancient Greeks coveted Egyptian art, he said, while the Romans collected Greek art. Mexico wants everything back, he added. To what end? Because it's theirs when it was made. There was no Mexico. Babe. He questioned whether all such historic art needs to belong in a museum, while alleging that Mexico displays in its museums less than 1% of what it owns. It's not your business, though, is it, mate? He said that if the country was successful in its efforts to have every piece currently in the United States repatriated, it would be somewhere between 100,000 and 500,000 pieces. That tells you the scale of the looting. That is not the defense. You've said the quiet part out loud. You've said the quiet part out loud. Wow. Okay. He continues, precious little snowflake that he is. Mexico claims they have the ability to manage it all, but if they cannot display what they currently possess, how can they display this material? It's not your business. It's not your business. If we sent back all 25 pieces Mexico is claiming it's theirs, it will rot in a warehouse for eternity. Tell me what's more ethical. Art being enjoyed by humans or art buried in a warehouse, possibly never to be seen again. Oh, I see, Bob. You are moral. You are helping to liberate the poor trapped art from being in the hands of those naughty people who have a cultural ownership for it, because really where it needs to be is going through an auction house and being sold into the household of a billionaire, the sort of people that also have a triceratops in their living room for just gigs. Apparently, it doesn't want 25 of the artifacts back. In fact, it wants 20, deeming 5 of them are fakes. I really hope whoever got sold the fakes sues the snot out of this auction house. Mexico's consul for protection and legal affairs said, that's a colonial argument we don't like. Understatement. We have one of the biggest anthropological museums in the world. We have the capacity, the know-how to manage all of this. It's very much like saying, oh, we need to protect this from the naughty natives for me that makes me ill. Every auction house, Christie's, Sotheby's, Bonhams, etc., and literally every museum have been required to repatriate objects that have turned out to have inaccurate provenance. Bob Dodge. His name is Bob Dodge. That does not constitute a history of dealing in smuggled goods. If dealers or museums were given access to various databases that show stolen goods, I think every one of us would use that to avoid these situations. Even so, far less than 1/10 of 1% of what we have handled has proven to be problematic. I don't like Bob. I don't like him. And that's what I'm going to say. And I hope there will be an update on this, I will let you know. I hope he encounters a rusty bear trap. But that's just me. Hope he can dodge that one. Lol. Continuing with auction houses. Thousands of African pieces are going up for sale this week after years of controversy tying a huge collection to Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis. This is an auction of 1,200 pieces. It's going to take place, or took place on the 4th of April. This massive art collection comes after Houston real estate agent and owner of the pieces, Sam Nanjeri, lost a 2022 civil case, forcing him to auction off the art and face $1 million in damages and fees. This, according to court records. These pieces were sitting in a county warehouse at the taxpayer's expense. Harris County criminal investigators determined that Commissioner Rodney Ellis transported and stored the art pieces in a warehouse in the Sunnyside neighborhood at no charge to the collector. After an investigation from the district attorney Kim Ogg's office, a grand jury decided not to indict Ellis for gathering the art. Apparently, this art had been collected since the 70s and was aimed to use those pieces. The aim was to use those pieces to create a museum and cultural centre in the greater Houston area. That dream, however, stalled, and the pieces were warehoused. Apparently, the collector did not turn in records to show he owned the art, how old the pieces were, or their origins, and ultimately didn't know how much it was worth. I am a tad baffled as to what's happened here and why they're being auctioned. I'll be honest, I didn't understand this one. So the storage has been controversial, but it also sounds like the provenance is controversial. So why are we auctioning this? Why are we auctioning this? If there gets any clarity on this, I will share it. But as it currently stands, I don't really understand why this is the process. But hopefully there will be some clarity at some point. In further news, organised religion, hypocritical. Also, bear poops in woods, and Pope, a Catholic. This is about the Pope. Apparently, the Pope supports restitution of Indigenous items to Canada, so why haven't they come home? We have got a story about a 200-year-old. This is I'm going to have to get a bigger version of this because I can't see the writing. It's too little. So let us. There we go. Let me get into that. So we have got That's being a pain. Okay, so a 200-year wampum belt has spent much of its existence in the Vatican's museum, across an ocean and thousands of kilometres away. Last year, the belt, made by Algonquin, Nipissing, and Mohawk peoples, was returned to Canada for 51 days before it was sent back to the vaults of the Vatican, where it rejoined an unknown quantity of other cultural belongings made by Indigenous people, many of which the groups who are responsible for those being made are calling for them to be repatriated. This belt is the only example the Globe and Mail, the newspaper, could find of an Indigenous-made item being returned in recent years, albeit only temporarily. This is one of the only ones to be returned by the Holy See, which is the Catholic Church's government. This is despite the fact that promises have been made. In March 2022, Inuit, Métis, and First Nations delegates travelled to Rome to meet with the Pope and deliver a message on the devastating effects of residential schools, the majority of which were run by the Catholic Church. In this visit, as a gesture of reconciliation, Vatican officials privately showed delegates a display of cultural items that are held in the Anima Mundi. This is the ethnological museum within the Vatican. The fact that that exists, I have questions. Among them were carved face masks from Canada's west coast, embroidered leather gloves of Cree origins, a colourful Gwich'in baby belt, an extremely rare century-old evolutic kayak from the Western Arctic. There is also a Vatican-issued catalogue called, quote, The Americas, Collections from the Vatican Ethnological Museum. So, this is a long article. It's worth a look if you want your blood pressure to rise. And yeah, this is the article is incredibly well written. And the Vatican secrets at a certain point need some poking into, is what I'm going to say. I mean, this doesn't seem to be a secret, but still, the hypocrisy is delicious for me. I agree. I would also be very interested to know the provenance of how that letter made its way into the Vatican archives. I think it's interesting that we don't have her responses to him, because what that points to is that whoever is getting hold of his letters to her and sending them on to papal agents, they haven't got the same kind of access for her responses to him. And there may not have been as many responses, but clearly it seems there were clearly some responses. I'm interested to know who in Anne's inner circle or her household at the time is essentially being a paid agent for the papacy, maybe Catherine of Aragon. Who has got access to her private spaces and to her letters? Unless, of course, it's coming out beforehand. So the messenger who's sending it to Henry is making a copy and then sending it on. I'd be very interested to know that. But that would need, the veil of secrecy would need to be lifted right quick. However, another excellent article is 2023, the year that looted art returned home. If you check this article out, you will see a month-by-month list, assessment, if you will, of all of the things that managed, or a collection of things that were once looted that have been repatriated. And after the blood pressure raising of the previous articles, this is a nice palate cleanse, shall we say. That's what I have in terms of repatriation. We are now going to hop on to new news. Just having a little look. Apparently, according to the Tudors, it was Will Brereton that exchanged letters. I mean, one of the things that I think is so fascinating and also in some ways humorous is the notion that people of that level of prominence could keep any secrets. So, for example, one of the things where they talk about, or there is a question about the potential that Elizabeth I at some time had a child secretly. While, yes, anything is possible, that is so vanishingly unlikely. We are talking about one of the most surveilled young women during the reigns of certainly her father, her brother, and her sister, and then one of the most observed queens in the world. Not only because people are looking at her as a potential match, so knowledge about her menstrual cycles, her body are big business. And there is no way that there weren't a whole host of paid spies. If Elizabeth I, whether before becoming queen or afterwards, had missed her period and was showing signs of pregnancy, the Pope would know before she did. The Pope would know before she did. But yes, I think it's almost it would be very interesting if we could sort of trace how that letter made its way. Because I believe the letter in the Vatican, I haven't seen it, is in Henry's handwriting, which means that it's not a copy that's been made. It's his hand, so it's a letter that got its way to her and was then presumably passed on by somebody. But who and why and for what profit? Anyway, on to the new news now. This is a statement coming from a statement released by the Public Library of Science. Archaeologists have uncovered the oldest Neolithic ships that are known to have traversed the Mediterranean Sea. This has been found at a lakeshore village near Rome. They have found 5 dugout canoes dating to between 5700 and 5100 BCE, crafted from hollowed out trees, which were burned and made of up to 4 different kinds of wood. Yes. Or people that were his agents or loyal families, people in England who were loyal to the papacy, bearing in mind the Dukes of Northumberland, the Percys were frequently crypto-Catholic or overtly Catholic, even when England was a Protestant nation. It's in their vested interest to have all of those, the Percys, the Howards, the Seymours, whoever's one of the movers and shakers, they've got a spy in Elizabeth's household. Then on top of that, Philip of Spain will have a spy in her household. Catherine de' Medici is going to have a spy in her household. I wouldn't be at all surprised if when she is talking and in discussions with the Ottoman Empire, whether or not the Ottoman Sultan, the Ottoman Emperor, has a spy in her household. Mary, Queen of Scots, almost certainly had spies in her household, in the same way that Elizabeth had spies in Mary, Queen of Scots' household, and vice versa, because knowledge has always been power, and it's an item of commerce. There's profit in it. So what we have here is the researchers say that these structurally sound seagoing vessels are thought to be able to help pinpoint the origins of sailing and will help to provide a better schema to understand the specialised labour employed at the time. The scholarly article on this can be found in PLOS, PLOS1, and they also have an article on ancient boat building and shipwrecks, which is entitled A Stitch in Time. So that's also linked in the article for you to check out. An archaeological site has been discovered within the boundaries of Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. Base officials said geomorphologists and members of the 49th Civil Engineer Squadron Environmental Flight uncovered a campsite early March that's thought to be about 8,200 years old. Quote, this site marks a pivotal moment in shedding light on the area's history and its early inhabitants. Quote, we uncovered a series of hearths or community campsites with remnants of mesquite charcoal, which is a tremendous find in and of itself. The site is apparently one of 400 archaeological discoveries found within the boundaries of Holloman. This base was built in 1942, and it's 6 miles southwest of Alamogordo, which is in south-central New Mexico. So as and when finds come out and we get more information, I will, of course, update you all on that. An axe, or rather, I suppose, an axe head dated to the 4th to 3rd millennium BCE has been discovered in Poland's Hurybskał district. That's a terrible pronunciation. I apologise. This axe has been associated with the Kukuteni Triptylia. No, Kukuteni Triptylia culture. This is a Neolithic, Chalcolithic people who inhabited Eastern Europe. This is a discovery of a copper axe in the town of Matsky. This is apparently presenting a puzzling enigma because Poland lies beyond the geographical range of this particular culture. And further complicating matters is that there's an absence of similar typologies of axes from that era within Poland itself. The conservator said, quote, our axe was made in a quite simple primitive casting method in a flat convex form, no longer used in the developed metallurgy, of the Bronze Age, and therefore it was necessary to pay attention to the earlier Neolithic era. Unfortunately, the inventories of Neolithic cultures from Poland, there is no such equivalent. The puzzle, however, was solved when researchers came across a publication with an identical copper axe that was found near the Kiev region of Ukraine. This was also discovered alongside fragments of pottery that was attributed to that same culture, which then provides context and date for the axe that they have found. The conservator said, quote, it's true that we have recorded finds from the Triptylian culture from the pottery of Grodek, the Hurybskał commune, and the presence of this axe nearby can be considered as a confirmation of the settlement of people of this culture also in eastern Poland. So they think that they are dealing with the oldest find of a copper product in Poland, which would be a great sensation. As and when more information about that comes out, I will, of course, share it. Is it possible that Amazonian warrior women, the ones found in Greek myth and legend, might actually have existed? These are the feared and formidable women warriors who lived on the edge of the known world. Hercules had to obtain the magic girdle of the Amazonian queen Hippolyta in one of his 12 labours. Achilles killed another, Penthesilea, only to fall in love with her as her beautiful face emerged from her helmet. These are the horseback riding, bow wielding nomads who fought and hunted just like men, that have long been shrouded in myth, but archaeologists are discovering increasing evidence that they really did exist. There is graves within a Bronze Age necropolis in Azerbaijan that are showing women to have been buried with weapons such as razor-sharp arrowheads, a bronze dagger and a mace, as well as jewellery. They think that these could be Amazon women who lived 4,000 years ago. These fearsome women were famed for their male-free society and their prowess on the battlefield, particularly with bow and arrow. The famous historian Bethany Hughes says, quote, it shows that there's truth behind the myths and legends of ancient Greece. She thinks this is evidence that was all the more significant when it was linked to earlier finds, because in 2019, 4 female warriors' remains were found, buried with arrowheads and spears. This was found in Russia. In 2017, Armenian archaeologists unearthed the remains of a woman who appeared to have died from battle injuries, as an arrowhead was buried in her leg. In the early 1990s, the remains of a woman buried with a dagger was found near the Kazakhstan. I'm thinking that's the Kazakhstan border. There we go. She says, a civilization isn't made up of a single grave. If we're talking about a culture that crosses the Caucasus and the steppe, which is what all these ancients said, obviously you need other remains. So some of the skeletons reveal that these women had used bows and arrows extensively. Hughes explained, their fingers are warped because they're using arrows so much. Change in the finger joints wouldn't just happen from hunting. That is some sustained big practice. What is very exciting is that there's a lot of bone evidence also showing clear evidence of sustained time in the saddle. Women's pelvises are basically opened up because they're riding horses. Their bones are just shaped by their lifestyle. She talked about their the carnelian is a semi-precious stone, which is the jewelry includes carnelian necklaces. Carnelian is a semi-precious stone. You see it often when people are high priestesses or goddesses. So it's a mark of woman with status, as are mace heads. These finds have been part of a Channel 4 series, which began on the 6th of April, and it's titled Bentley Hughes Treasures of the World. So if you have access to Channel 4 on demand, depending on your location, not that I'm suggesting you get a VPN to trick the location, I would never suggest that. You could probably watch this on the catch-up, I'd imagine. So she is showing these Amazonian finds. She is visiting the places, and I think this is very exciting. So we will, as and when more updates on this come out, I will, of course, share them with you. Archaeologists have found a cemetery and cultural objects from the Warring States period. This is 475 to 221 BCE. This is a era that's defined by numerous conflicts between several feuding Chinese kingdoms. Archaeologists have so far uncovered 176 tombs, with 174 of them dating from the Warring States period and 2 from the Han Dynasty. A member of the excavation team told Heritage Daily that most of the tombs are modest in size, while 9 are medium-sized tombs with sloping tomb passages. Within M3 and M4, excavations have found the blue-grey decay marks of the coffins and the funerary objects, including bronze tripods, pots and boats, as well as bronze swords, spoons and horse bits. In the vicinity are also several horse burials with chariots found in situ. The press statement says this cemetery has yielded over 500 cultural objects, among them sets of pottery, imitation copper pottery ritual vessels, and everyday items such as plates, bowls, and combs, as well as several jade rings. The archaeologist on the project says this excavation provides a source of new materials for the study of funerary customs in the Xianyang area during the Middle and Late Warring States period. It also provides important physical data for the study of Chao culture. So we shall see what new information comes out. I think we're going to have lots and lots of updates coming out of these new news pieces. It's very exciting. A high-status Macedonian tomb has been found in ancient Aegea. This was, during antiquity, the original Macedonian capital, and it remained a burial place for royalty after the capital was transferred to the city of Pella at the beginning of the 4th century BCE. At the 36th annual archaeological meeting for, quote, the archaeological project in Macedonia and Thrace in 2023, the Honorary Superintendent of Antiquities, Angeliki Kotaris, announced the discovery of a high-status Macedonian tomb in the necropolis of Aegea. This tomb was found during construction works for a new sewage network. The interior of this tomb measures 3.7 by 2.7 meters, and it's decorated with an encircling golden band with bows. How cute are the little bows? Aren't they sweet? The tomb is apparently said to date from the 3rd century BCE, so that's after the reign of Alexander the Great. And it's located near to a similar tomb that was first excavated in 1969. The tomb holds the burial of a man whose remains are placed alongside a shield with reinforced iron parts and several weapons. The remains of a woman, likely the wife, was also buried in the tomb, accompanied by items of jewellery such as beads and necklaces and a golden myrtle wreath. The archaeologists explained that part of the necropolis was reserved for high-status Macedonians, as evidenced by several previous tomb discoveries that contained rich funerary objects. Yeah, they don't, in the article, they don't really explain why there would be bows, Wheezy Squeezebox. Because that sort of feels, to me anyway, it feels like a very sort of modern decoration, almost like for a little girl's bedroom. So I'd be very interested to know what the significance of those would have been in ancient Macedonian culture. Shane, I think I can understand why. It's because the bottom half of the room is covered in a blood red. I mean, it looks like something Dexter would find. Alexandra says, "What's the state of the British Library hacked?" By the way, to my knowledge, we haven't got much further from when we last talked about it. Things are slowly coming back online. I'm not sure if we're back up to full usability in the off-site resources. However, I have been able to access some of the blog posts that I've wanted to access that I wasn't able to access at the start of the year. So it is coming back online. I don't think we have any knowledge of the culprits. So I will check it out and see what's going on. One of the world's earliest known books is going up for auction, and it is thought that it's going to fetch more than $2.6 million. This is the Crosby-Schoyen Codex, written in Coptic on papyrus in Egypt, and it's the earliest Christian liturgical book. That's according to the international auction house Christie's. They are going to be selling this on June the 11th. Pardon me. It is believed that a single scribe wrote this codex. It's made up of 52 leaves or 104 pages. And it was written, they think, over a period of 40 years at a monastery in Upper Egypt. It's been carbon dated, and the book is thought to date to sometime between the middle 3rd and 4th centuries. One of the earliest witnesses to the spread of Christianity, the codex features the first epistle of Peter and the book of Jonah. The pages are preserved behind plexiglass and kept in 2 lockable wooden boxes. Christie's has estimated that it will sell for between 2.6 million and $3.8 million. It was in the University of Mississippi's collections until 1981. It then exchanged hands a couple of times in the 80s, before in 1988 being purchased by a Norwegian manuscript collector, Martin Schoen. And thus this codex is the oldest known book to be in private hands. The senior specialist in books and manuscripts of Christie's has pointed out that this book will have wide appeal to institutions and private owners alike. At least it's behind plexiglass. The well-preserved position of the codex is largely down to the conducive climatic conditions in Egypt where the codex was discovered. The codex has been listed as part of a wider collection of manuscript masterpieces from this Schoen collection, which Christie describes as, quote, one of the largest and most comprehensive collections of manuscripts ever assembled. According to the website, quote, the importance of the materials in this collection goes far beyond the scope of a private collection or even a national public collection. The sale spans 1,300 years of cultural history and includes World Heritage manuscripts such as the Crosby-Schoyen Codex, the Holcomb Hebrew Bible, and the Bergen Bible, but also Greek literature, humanist masterpieces, a book owned by a saint, early English law, a historically important Scottish chronicle, and the earliest known bookbinding. This codex is apparently currently on view at Christie's, New York, where it will remain until April the 9th. If and or indeed when we learn who has purchased this when the auction happens, or indeed what institution, I will of course update you. We have a very happy child archaeologist, which we love to see. This is 10-year-old Rio, and he has discovered a Roman trumpet brooch. This was during a Midlands Detecting Days group dig. This happened near Leek in Staffordshire. 10-year-old Rio Dolman made a discovery while using his Garrett Ace 400i. I'm assuming that's metal detector. He said, quote, I got a high signal and started to dig. The ground was a little hard, and when I got the plug out, there was a lot of stones and rocks in the hole. My pinpointer didn't pick up the signal at first, so I had to try and dig a little more. When I tried my pinpointer again, I got a signal and used my digging trowel to get more rocks and stones out. Then I saw something with a nice green colouring, so I knew it was something old. Once I got it out of the hole, I shouted to my dad, who was nearby. He came over and said, I'm sure it's a Roman brooch, but I wasn't 100% sure. We showed Tony Cummins, who runs our digs, and he was very excited and said it was a Roman trumpet brooch. I was so happy. It's great to think I'm the first person to hold it in thousands of years. I put it on display in my cabinet with my other Roman brooches and coins. Congratulations to Rio, this article says, another great young enthusiast in the metal detecting hobby, through who the future of the hobby will flourish. Isn't that lovely? We need these child archaeologists. We need to form a collection of them, like the Power Rangers, but with less lycra. I feel like the helmets would obscure your digging capacities. Ancient DNA is apparently revealing intriguing details about a 6th century Chinese emperor. Emperor Wu ruled China as part of the Northern Zhou dynasty from 560 to 580 and is credited with unifying the northern part of ancient China. His tomb was found in 1996, and researchers have analysed genetic material from his remains, including a nearly complete skull. Through this, they found information about his appearance, health, and ancestry. Quote, some scholars said the Xianbai had exotic looks, such as a thick beard, high nose bridge, and yellow hair. Our analysis shows Emperor Wu had typical East or Northeast Asian facial characteristics. They hoped that ancient DNA might shed light on Wu's cause of death. He died suddenly at 36, according to the study. And explanations for his demise put forward in the historical text include illness and deliberate poisoning. The team, however, couldn't find any definitive evidence as to why he died. The researchers did say they uncovered a genetic susceptibility to stroke, which could explain some of the symptoms the historians have attributed to Wu, namely eyelid drooping, blindness, and an affected gait. Archaeologists are applying ancient DNA techniques to tease out information from bones, teeth, artifacts, and cave dirt. The team used the information to imagine what he would have looked like, creating a 3D facial reconstruction that humanizes a little-known figure. The study offers intriguing insight into the historical figure of Emperor Wu, with facial approximation presented appearing convincingly realistic. Skin, hair, and eye colour details are notably not possible to predict from skeletal remains alone, making genetic analysis an insightful tool. And I am tentatively all for the development of this kind of study. I think what it seems to be happening is that this reconstruction has been made possible through DNA, but also through having access to the skull itself. I saw a few years ago people having their DNA checked, apparently anonymously, and then it being run through a processor that made a best guess approximation of what that person would look like, and then they were comparing it to the real person. And the way they made it look is they made it look like you essentially got an e-fit from a DNA profile. This makes me uncomfortable because things that start off in archaeology and other sciences can be used as evidence forms, and we in society are victims, I think, of the CSI effect. So I was almost a little bit cautious about sharing this because I am cautious about the use of a DNA sample to reconstruct a face. I think it's very important to note that this face that what's been reconstructed here is colouring, and it's a best guess approximation. They have a complete skull, so they can reconstruct based upon that. So I am tentatively concerned, excited that this has been done, but concerned about this being taken, developed, and used to close cases in any way possible. But that's just where my anxiety goes. Archaeologically, this is really interesting. The part of me that's a true crime buff goes, this could be used in a way that puts innocent people into prison. Julesy says that when Richard III was reconstructing the skull, they had him with dark hair. They changed it because the DNA showed he would have had blonde or lighter hair, which I think is, and logically as well, makes some sense because of that sort of descent from the Edwards. You know, there is conversation about them being lighter haired. So interesting. A monastic site has been discovered on a Scottish island. This one was founded by St Mullach. According to researchers, the site dates from the 7th to the 10th century AD, founded by an Irish missionary who evangelized the Picts on the western seaboard of Scotland. My husband's just texted me. He's wondering if they changed Richard III's hair colour because certain people prefer blondes. You're going to get me in trouble, James. You're going to get me in trouble. Lismore had long been an important religious centre for the Gaelic kingdom of Dalriada, which perhaps motivated the decision to found a monastic community there in AD 562. Irish missionaries had learnt to focus heavily on the similarity and continuity between early Christianity and paganism rather than the differences between them. A 6-year community-led project, members from the Lismore Historical Society uncovered an oval stone building and a workshop where craft workers manufactured jewellery from precious metals. The building has been radiocarbon dated, and that's placed it between the 7th to the 10th century during the period of the early monastery. They have found fragments of around 120 crucibles, broken ceramic molds for making penannular brooches, and carvings made in stone, wood, bone, and antler. A press statement by the Historical Society said XRF analysis of the surfaces of these crucibles at the National Museum of Scotland has revealed they were used for melting copper alloys, silver, and gold. This is a fine craft activity, evidence of a sophisticated and influential monastic centre. They are doing analysis and conservation of 1,500 significant finds from the site. That is continuing. So as and when we learn more, I will, of course, update you. This is a drawing of a body deposition. These are not human remains. I'm just pointing that out because it is a small image and it might look like it's a burial. They have discovered strange skull modifications in Viking women. 3 Viking Age women from the Baltic Sea island of Gotland had their skulls lengthened. There's a study that's come out in the journal Current Swedish Archaeology. They identified around 130 individuals, mainly men, with horizontal grooves carved in their teeth, with a surprising concentration on Gotland. And there have been many interpretations for these dental changes, which range from slave markings to symbols of royal elites. There is a thought they actually serve as identity markers within a closed group of traders. The cranial modifications that we're talking about are so far known from just 3 female individuals from Gotland. These date back to the latter part of the 11th century. All 3 women were interred in different locations across Gotland. Their skull modifications gave them a unique and remarkable appearance by elongating their heads. There are further details that can be discerned. One of the women died between the ages of 25 and 30, while the other was between 55 and 60. These alterations, unlike the dental modifications, are apparently alien to the Scandinavian Viking culture. They have cases of them dating from the 9th to 11th century in Eastern Europe, which suggests that they may have originated there. What's unclear is how the custom of skull modification reached Gotland. So either the three females were born in southeastern Europe, perhaps as children of Gotlandic or East Baltic traders, and their skulls were modified there in the first years of life, or the modifications were made on Gotland or in the Eastern Baltic, respectively. And thus they represent a cultural adoption of a long unknown to Scandinavian Viking age. A common background of these 3 females can be assumed due to the close chronological dating of the 3 burials, especially due to the very familiar execution of the skull modification. They were found in elaborately decorated tombs with jewellery and other accessories typical of Gotland's women's clothing. This suggests that they were accepted and integrated into the local community. Their faith affiliations are unknown, but it seems that they were laid to rest within a Christian framework. It's very interesting. And I know very little about skull modification, but I assume that the process of starting it must happen in very early childhood, right? Before the skull has fused and formed. So, very interesting though, isn't it? And as and when we find out more about this, I will, of course, pass it on. Still Viking. Don't think these were combing the altered skulls. However, we have got an extraordinary Viking comb revealing Ipswich's medieval importance. This antler and bone finds were found in Ipswich in Suffolk during 40 excavations over the course of 20 years. They indicate the presence of Vikings in Ipswich in the late 9th century. And authors of the recently published analysis of 1,341 finds and 2,400 fragments of waste that have been unearthed during digs between 1974 and 1994. So on the skull modification, my husband, the anthropologist, points out that in Ecuador, it's still done to babies in rural areas / islands away from the mainland, so infants. Quote, "It was always our intention that the book had a European outlook and placed Ipswich in the centre of a developing early medieval world for one particular craft. There are several items that indicate links abroad, particularly northern France, Frisia, which is what we now know as parts of the Netherlands, Germany and Denmark, and also southern Scandinavia. It is a beautiful, ornately carved thing. Ipswich was founded as an Anglo-Saxon trading port in the wake of the collapse of the Roman Empire, and it prospered through maritime trade with Europe. These combs were made in Scandinavia, and they indicate the presence of Vikings in Ipswich in the late 9th century. It fell under Viking rule in AD 869. Combs were also made in the town and had distinctive local forms. We're told that most of these combs were made from fragments of red deer antler, although some were made from bone, including whale. Brooch molds, pins, strap ends, weaving, and textile making equipment, as well as some gaming pieces reflecting the Viking enthusiasm for board games, were also examined. There were around 40 excavations in Ipswich over 20 years, through which they've been able to build, quote, a convincing picture of the role that town played in medieval life. So the Will Fletcher, who is the development team leader for Historic England of the East of England, said it was a, quote, fascinating insight into Ipswich's medieval history and its reach across the North Sea. And what beautiful items they are. Like, the work that's gone into them is just evident. I love that. From bones in your hair to bones on your feet. Archaeologists have found a medieval ice skate made from animal bone, thought to date to around 1,000 years ago. This is found in the Czech Republic's Moravia region. The artifact probably dates to the second half of the 10th century or the first quarter of the 11th century, apparently. This comes from the fact that researchers found it amid pottery fragments that were characteristic of this period. Apparently, it dates back to a time when there was a very important fortress in the area of Upper Square. It was a stronghold for the Polish king Boleslav the Brave, who occupied Moravia at the time and had his soldiers stationed there. It's thought that this was made from horse bone, likely probably from the shin. It's got a specific shape, curved into a tip into which a hole was drilled, and there's another hole at the back. These would have been used to thread a strap through, which was then used to attach the skate to a shoe or a wooden sledge. The people who used this item 1,000 years ago did not use the blades for sports or leisure, but simply to get around in the frigid winter months. It wouldn't be skating as we know it. It's more a shuffle along the frozen surface with the help of a stick or two. So almost like a kind of proto-skiing. They'd also put these blades on sledges to carry loads of goods across the frozen water. This bone skate is nearly identical to skates recovered in Northern Europe. For example, from Berka in Sweden, which is a very famous archaeological site in the Viking Age, but also from York in England and Dublin in Ireland. So places where it can be very cold indeed. High hopes for the treasure lost in the wash. Archaeologists are finally on the search for bad King John, his lost treasure. This is archaeologists from West Norfolk and King's Lynn Archaeological Society. So I've talked about King John, certainly on History After Dark. He is known as Bad King John. He's a very naughty boy. He gets himself into all sorts of scrapes with his barons. Magna Carta comes out of the kerfuffles of his reign. He may or may not have done away with his nephew. There's a French invasion of England because they get so sick of him, and he apparently loses the crown jewels in the Wash, which is an area he tries to cross. In low tide, you can cross this area, When the tide comes in, he misjudges the time and the tide, and so essentially his baggage train sinks in the wash. Researchers are going to excavate an area of land next to Walpole Marsh in the Fenlands, which is about 8 kilometres from the present-day coastline. In the medieval period, this was a large natural marshland, often prone to flooding. This site was chosen based on aerial survey using LiDAR, which we've talked about before. It's a method of remote sensing using light in the form of a pulsed laser to measure ranges, variable distances to the Earth. The quote says there could be something there, absolutely, but actually getting to where it's been deposited in a changing dynamic river system, you're looking at 1,000,000 to 1, spoil sport. Enso Energy is planning to develop the site in late 2024 into a new solar farm in order to power 10,150 homes. However, according to a report by the energy firm, quote, there are no statutory landscape, heritage, or ecological designations on site. So they're looking, but there are some naysayers. I hope the naysayers will be proved wrong, because it'd be really fun if we did find the treasure in the wash. Brian, I have not talked about the 2 Isabellas. Little Isabella of Angoulême. I can certainly look into them. I feel quite sorry for little Isabella. So yes, I could investigate that for a future video. Why not? Why not? That is what they need. We need to get some 7 to 10-year-olds with metal detectors in their Peppa Pig wellies or whatever they still watch at 7 to 10. Give them metal detectors and a little shovel and send them on their way. It's the school holiday still. Put them kiddies to work. An excavation at a French hotel has revealed a medieval castle complete with moat and finds of coins and jewellery. This is an excavation project in northwestern France. The castle is thought to be 600 years old. And it was not unknown to archaeologists when they began a preventative dig on the hotel property in the city of Vannes early last year. But the extent and impressiveness of the ruins they actually found did surprise them, we're told. It does look pretty impressive what they've managed to find. The structure was built by the Duke of Brittany, John IV, in around 1380. The castle was his, and the desire to build it was apparently tied to the Duke's desire to, quote, assert his power. It contains advanced architecture, structural complexities, and it's also very large. This indicates the Duke took construction on this dwelling space quite seriously. They found evidence in the bounds of the cellar ruins that suggested the original structure had 3 or even 4 floors, like the remnants of several staircases. They described one staircase in particular as ornate and remarkably preserved, with 3 distinctive steps and space for a window seat. Remains of the castle's functional elements were unveiled too. They had latrines, drainage pipes on either end of the property that seemed to have been used for some of the upper floors as well. They searched the latrines and pipes. They found a wealth of other objects that could be traced back to the 15th or 16th century. Coins, jewellery, cooking appliances like pots and pans, wooden bowls, fragments of wooden barrels that the community in the region helped to preserve. The team also found remains of a bridge that would have stretched out over a moat, connecting the castle to the outside world. Of course, an element crucial to allow the castle residents to access the city, archaeologists said. How fun is that? So cool. I hope they're going to have a museum or exhibition of that. Very good. Very good. And for those of you who saw my video from Friday, where I was talking about domesticated or royal indoor house pets, shall we say, I did mention talking about working animals and also animals in the Royal Menagerie at the Tower of London. This is the sort of thing that will be covered in Working Animals, because the Tudors are using horses for a variety of things. There's, particularly when we get to the really high upper echelons, they've got horses for all different sorts of things. You've got stories about ladies of the court riding on a steady palfrey. You've got big cart horses. You've got war horses. War horses seem to be similar, but maybe not identical to horses that are used in the tournament. Then you've got horses for coursing horses. You've got little quick horses, horses for hunting. So they are really specialized in their breeding. And it's something that this language, this knowledge of working horses and of working animals when it comes to falconry and those kind of hunting languages and the domestication husbandry of beasts like that, it makes its way into so much stuff. And I think it's still in so much of our language today. And I will go into this more, but things that the big one is in falconry. And we are using falconry language every day without, I think, necessarily knowing where it comes from. So phrases like hoodwinked, wrapped around the little finger, and under the thumb are all supposed to come from the husbandry of falcons. So those kinds of things, they are very much in our language, and the knowledge as well, the communal and collective knowledge of horses and what they look like, that is perhaps not as universal as it is today, but clearly was in the early modern period. For evidence of that, you only have to look at Shakespeare's play Othello, where he uses the phrase that he talks about Barbary horses, he talks about jennets for Germans and coursers for cousins. He is using, and of course, an old black ram is tupping your white ewe. He is using a language of animal husbandry that the people within his Globe Theatre or the theatres of the nobility and the court would absolutely have understood implicitly, in a way that a smaller demographic of our society understands today. And I think that's quite interesting, actually. So I will be talking about it because I'm a weird nerd about stuff like that, unsurprisingly. But here we have got a Tudor era horse cemetery in Westminster that is thought to be the resting place for elite imported animals. This animal cemetery was discovered nearly 30 years ago. But recent advances in archaeological science technique, including the study of chemical compositions, have allowed researchers to identify the origins of several of these physically elite horses, and also to trace the routes they took to reach the British shores in the formative years of their life. Rumpelstiltskin Snubbuckle, to my knowledge, dragon fire only comes out of the mouth. If you want a beast that gets fire out of his bumhole, you are looking for a bonacon. A bonacon looks kind of like a bull. It looks bovine, but it apparently farts fire. So there you go. Don't get behind it. So it might fart fire into your eyes. And no one needs that. So yes, a bonacon. Flaming farts more than flaming poops, I'd say. They point out that, my husband's just texted me about, there's this, my son loves this book. Our friend bought it back from her trip to the Natural History Museum in the States, in New York, I think. Yeah, maybe. And he loves it. It's called The Dinosaur That Pooped a Planet. And when I tell you, when that dinosaur in that book starts pooping out that planet, he laughs like a drain. Because my kid loves a fart joke. Tonight before bed, I thought he was going to asphyxiate with laughter because I started saying Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. He really enjoys a plosive P. I was 30, but he enjoys that plosive sound of the P. And when I tell you, he was wheezing. He was laughing so much. It's very fun that he's so easily entertained. So this talks about how these animals are essentially akin to modern supercars, and they come from a variety of locations across Europe. And these are bred specially for height or strength or other attributes. Of these remains, they include 3 of the tallest animals known from late medieval England, some of them standing up to 15.3 hands high. That's 1.6 meters. Now, that's quite small by modern standards, but very impressive for their day. Debbie says, my son once let out a massive but instead of saying pardon me, it shouted ta-ta. Look, I love that for him. I love that for him. Debbie, your son's a hero. Your son's my hero. Oh, spectacular. And Lizzie, I have seen The Dinosaur That Pooped a Planet is a series. Yes, I have seen the other dinosaur pooping books. I have to be a little bit careful because my son is a mimic, and there are certain things that we find acceptable that he will he will then go in and repeat at daycare. So when we watch The Lion King and they make direct reference to Simba having unalived his dad, we had a whole conversation at daycare pickup because Gabby was talking about this one, that one, and the other one, and he was using the K word, and we were like, "Oh Lord, where's he got that from?" But it was in a Disney film, and we hadn't even spotted it. So we have to be incredibly careful what we read and show to him because he's Timmy. Basically, he absorbs it, locks it away in his mind palace, takes it into daycare with him, spews it out, and then I get called at the daycare being like, "We've had a a logbook incident." Yep, cool. Will do. Oh, will do. Will do. It's very tiring. So what we have here, they have measured the chemical signatures in the horse's teeth, and they say they are highly distinctive and very different to anything they would expect to see in a horse that grew up in the UK. Thus, they have this sort of trade in horses, the market. They took 22 molar teeth from 15 individual animals. They were obviously looking at the isotope ratios, and the team was therefore able to identify the potential origin of each horse and also rule out others. Interestingly, they ruled out prime European horse breeding centres such as Spain and southern Italy. At least half the horses had diverse international origins: Scandinavia, the Alps, other northern and eastern locations. This, they think, is consistent with the breeding patterns of royal stud farms. They say the teeth showed heavy use of a curb bit, often employed with elite animals, especially those groomed for war and tournaments after the 14th century. The bit wear on 2 of the mares suggests they were used under saddle or in harness and for breeding. The research team have found evidence for horses used in jousting, the sport of kings, in which riders showcase their fighting skills and horsemanship on elite mounts. These new findings provide a tangible archaeological signature of this trade, emphasizing its international scale. It's apparent that medieval London elite were explicitly targeting the highest quality horses they could find at a European scale. Plus ça change, hey? A new study on a 16th century shipwreck in Portugal has revealed valuable cargo. Are we talking about the use of Trump? Yes. I'm aware that obviously a previous president of the United States has that surname. In this country, in the UK, a Trump has always been a fart. Always. And you would say to a person, did you just trump, or I trumped, or was that you that trumped? So I don't know how old it is. I'll have to OED it. But yes, the trump of the fart it's well worn. It's an old one. It's an oldie but a goodie. So was it? So we used to really enjoy at school the song Nelly the Elephant. Nelly the Elephant packed a bag and said goodbye to the circus. Off she went with a trumpety trump, 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 and we'd make fart noises. Yeah. Oh, that's the other one, of course. Yes, Shane. We also have top trumps, which we could use to rank our farts, but it's also obviously the game top trumps. I used to love playing top trumps. It's very cool. Top trumps is a great game. I had one of like goblins when I was young. I loved that game. Love it. Just having a list of what people use to call farts. Excellent. I love this community. Fabulous. So we're told in this one, 10 years ago, a strong storm washed in the loot of a 16th century shipwreck onto a beach in Portugal, an hour north of Porto. The researchers have now analysed this cargo. When it was found, so essentially 2 individuals were scouring the beach for found objects when they found what they thought were old helmets. They alerted authorities, and they just found this enormous amount of archaeological material. And so the town then hired a conservation technician in 2019, and then the next year, some of the relics showed up in a exhibition commemorating the circumnavigation of Magellan. Since then, and as of this week, the cargo of the still unidentified Bellino 1 has enjoyed the same attention as its artillery and hull. Academics are studying the ship's construction, and they think that it is Iberian and from around the 16th century. However, more recent studies have now questioned that conclusion, because none of the typical artifacts that would confirm an Iberian identification, like jewellery or coinage, were found. Instead, they found 490 pewter fragments, 254 pewter vessels. So that's mostly plates, but also porringers, some with floral handles and with 2 spoons. The pewter, it does appear amongst early modern wrecks, but it's normally sailors' property. But analysis of these plates reveal maker's mark aligning with European workshops during the 16th century. We've got a kind of collection of those maker's marks there. They also studied 125 copper fragments corresponding to 34 plates, formerly high-quality arms dishes, Nuremberg being the chief producer of such relics. The remaining objects include 7 iron items that were so degraded that they couldn't be identified without X-ray, which shows they comprised of 2 axe heads, at least 2 swords and 1 nail. 32 cannonballs of varied stones, origins and sizes also washed ashore, along with 2 glazed ceramic shards. It is thought the ship that was found could potentially have been the Nossa Senhora de Rosa, which apparently sunk in 1577. However, the new study inconclusively refutes that, make of that what you will. Instead, they think the ship belonged to a successful 16th century merchant who planned to sell the metal treasures for use aboard other ships. The study concludes, no matter, the value of these objects suggests that the ship's wreck was a huge economic loss for someone, and it is still treasured today. Cargo isn't often employed in helping researchers understand shipwrecks like this. The Espensend municipality is at work acquiring a space to store the doomed haul. So, interesting. As and when we find out more, I will let you know. I see the conversation has devolved beautifully. Well done, everybody. We're now on to the old tactical chunder. Loving your work. Let's plumb the depths with this conversation. The bar is in hell. A late medieval helmet has been found off of the Sicilian coast. This has been found by archaeologists from the University of Naples. The object has been recovered by two professors, Enzo Mora and Leopoldo Repola, from the University of Naples, and it's since been delivered to the Superintendency of the Sea. The helmet has been identified as a cabasset, which is a type of helmet worn by infantry and light cavalry from the mid-16th century through to the 17th century. And even though it's obviously like rust and degraded, you can still very much see the shape, and it's recognizable as the sort of helmets that we see in kind of art. Cabasset is thought to have its origins in the Spanish word cabeza, meaning head. However, some think that it actually connects to the Italian dialect word for pear, alluding to the stem-like extension of the helmet, which is reminiscent of the fruit. There are plans to do further studies in the area where this helmet was found to determine whether it's an isolated discovery or perhaps in relation to a wreck site that's not yet been discovered. The coastline opposite the island where it was found mainly consists of a nature reserve. However, to the north are the ruins of Torre Sveva, a defensive tower from the 15th century, which was constructed to defend a small port and associated warehouses for trade. So maybe more, or maybe somebody was just at an accident and dropped their helmet in the water. Hopefully, we shall see. We shall see. Centuries-old Aztec text. That's a hard combination of words. Aztec texts. That's a tongue twister there, right there. It details the history of their capital, the conquests and falls of the Spanish. And the Mexican government recently bought 3 illustrated codices known as the Codices of San Andres Tetepilco. They've been purchased from a private family that had passed down these Aztec documents for generations. The Aztecs, we're told, ruled over a large area of what's now Mexico in the 15th and 16th centuries. The capital of this was Tenochtitlan in what is now Mexico City. The codices written in the indigenous Nahuatl language and Spanish continued to be produced into the early 17th century. One of the newly purchased codices describes the founding of Tenochtitlan around 1300 and the lords who ruled it in pre-Hispanic times. The codex also describes the Aztec conquest of the city of Tetepilco around 1440 and how that city's rulers swore vassalage to the Aztecs. It even details the arrival of the Spanish in 1519 and their rule up to 1611. The Spanish continued to rule Mexico until 1821. These codices were originally owned by a Mexico City family who have requested anonymity. The document's authenticity has been confirmed, and the government has negotiated with the family and has purchased these codices for 9.5 million pesos, which is about $570,000. The two other codices sold by this family include one that describes the founding of Tetepilco and another that details the assets held by a church in Tetepilco. That's according to the paper El País. This is really interesting to me, and I hope this gets fully digitized and also explained, translated. Fabulous. It's fabulous to have. I mean, it's we have the documents of and the drivers, I suppose, of colonization from the other side. Having that record from the people who were being colonized is really, really great and really useful. So I definitely want to have a look at that. A 17th century hussar armour has been discovered in Poland. The hussars were light cavalry regiments in the late 17th and 18th centuries. The name originates historically from medieval Hungary, where light cavalry of the Black Army of Hungary served Matthias Corvinus, King of Hungary and Croatia, from 1458 to 1490. Of course, now the UK also has a branch of the army called the Hussars, the King's Royal Hussars, or the KRH as they go by. By the 16th and 17th century, Habsburg emperors had hired Hungarian hussars as mercenaries to serve against the Ottoman and on various battlefields throughout Western Europe. The armour that's been found in Poland was discovered at a depth of 60 centimetres. Most of the main components are intact. However, the cuirass lacks the breastplate and the backplate. I'm not 100%. So what we've got here is up the top, I think we've got the circular bit that sits around the neck. That's what we're seeing at the top. That round thing to the right of that picture is the bit that protects the clavicle, the neck, and the nape. They also say that you've got the braces for protecting the forearm, the left shoulder pad, and a semicircular helmet, which I think might be the thing in the middle at the top. They do point out that the lack of decorative elements do make further identification difficult. After conservation, the armour is going to go on display at the Castle Museum in Sandomierz. This, we are told that using a metal detector in Poland requires a permit that granted by the Provincial Conservator of Monuments in accordance with an act of the 23rd of July 2003 under the protection and terms for the care of monuments. Yes, so I know in medieval armor the neck piece is called a courgette, not a gorget, a gorget. However, the gorget, this seems to be describing something that protects the clavicle, the neck, and the nape. So it could be I think the gorget, if it comes up, it could come up. All I can see is the clavicle protecting bit. So I don't know if it still is a gorget in the 16th and 17th century. Probably though. Courgette. I'm going to have a courgette, and then what I might have is an aubergine. I will protect myself with vegetables. Alert the costermongers. Oh, I've broken. It's happened. This is weird. A 300-year-old document's been found down the back of a couch. How? Clean? What? Do you want to? Where would the aubergine go, Lorcan? Well, that's for me to know. Oh dear. Oh dear. It's gone 10:30. The witching hour's happened, and I've got silly. I'm overtired and I'm showing off. So this, I don't know how this happens. This was found on the back of a couch in Masterton. It was signed in 1735, rediscovered in 1947, and its owner now wants to return it to its rightful place, which is not down the back of their sofa, apparently. Cheryl Banks's father found the parchment document down the back of a sofa. She's not exactly certain when he made the intriguing discovery, but guesses it was the late 1940s. After her parents married in 1947, they lived in a house in Masterton with a second-hand couch that had rolled arms and was covered in a rough canvas. I don't really know what that means, but apparently, one day her father was sitting on the couch, put his hand down the back and pulled out the parchment. The parchment was apparently around. It was in his writing desk, but they weren't allowed to open it. So, after the death of her parents, it was in Banks's possession, still kept in the old writing desk. So she's still reluctant to open the folded parchment, but she wants to return it from whence it came, which she thinks is England. I'd like it to go to the right place, but is that the right place? The parchment, signed in 1735, seems to be an agreement for 1 year between a Matthew East and a James Tillier. Perhaps it's an employment contract. However, the National Library's collection care lead, Peter Whitehead, said instead it's a lease. Before moving to New Zealand, Whitehead apparently worked in the English archives where parchment manuscripts were common. He is a parchment conservator previously, dealing with medieval court scrolls found in a sofa. It could well be that behind the sofa, under a cushion, would be considered a safe place. Parchment was popular for the legal documents for its robust structure, with sheepskin preferred because if someone tried to scratch anything out, it was obvious it had been tampered with. However, we're told in England, property leases were not considered hugely important for a long time, and many documents were thrown away when property transactions became computerized. In Aotearoa, the National Library has a number of parchment documents, but Whitehead said there still hasn't been much cause for his parchment conservation skills. His advice to Banks was to find out if there was a connection between the names in the document and the residents of the Warapia. Families emigrating to New Zealand from the UK would have brought their possessions with them, including documents like this. She said that she marvelled at her father's find, quote, "When things go down behind the couch, it's the simplest of places to find things and people don't look." As for the couch that harboured the parchment, that was replaced in the 1970s, upgraded for a more modern piece of furniture. Interesting. Interesting. Julesy, I swear someone dropped their cell phone during the manufacture of my couch. It buzzes sometimes. Otherwise, I've got bees in my sofa. I'm going to ask, how long have you had the sofa? Because there's not a phone on earth that's going to hold that charge. Why is your couch buzzing? Why is your couch buzzing? That needs investigating. What? Your couch shouldn't buzz. I don't know a lot, but I know that's the case. An eyewitness sketch from the American Revolution has been found hanging in a collector's bedroom. A nearly 250-year-old drawing of Continental Army soldiers and camp followers has been donated to the Philadelphia Museum of the American Revolution. This is a pen and ink piece, and it's one of the few surviving works of its kind made by an eyewitness. Apparently, it had been hanging in the bedroom of Rose Cartagena for 40 years. A statement from the museum says the drawing shows 9 individuals travelling with an open wagon. There are 2 soldiers walking on foot, while 2 others, a commissioned officer and the wagon driver, are on horseback. Inside the wagon are two men, two women, one of whom is holding an infant. The partial inscription reads, an exact representation of a wagon belonging to the North Carolina Brigade of Continental Troops, which passed through Philadelphia in August, done by, and then the last bit has been cut off. Apparently, this sketch matches 18th century newspaper accounts of the day in question. On August 25th, 1777, the North Carolina Brigade marched through Philadelphia to join up with George Washington's army ahead of the battles of Brandywine and Germantown, which took place in September and October, respectively. How cool is this? This is apparently the first wartime depiction of North Carolina troops known to exist, and only the second known depiction of female camp followers of the Continental Army that's done by an eyewitness. The article points out the women in this sketch were part of a controversial group known as camp followers, wives, widows, runaways, and others who marched with the Continental Army. By 1777, around 2,000 women had joined with the troops to help out with sewing, washing clothes, nursing, and cooking. Washington was, however, not happy about their presence. Quote, the multitude of women in particular, especially those who are pregnant or who have children, are a clog upon every movement. Apparently, the sketch's owner was so pleased with the work that she decided to donate the piece, whose other side features 5 additional male figure studies, to the museum. We're told this sketch is extremely important to our understanding of the daily operations of the Continental Army. It helps us visualize the everyday life of these troops, the joyous, the difficult, the mundane. So cool. Brilliant. A pair of Chinese vases that have been rescued from white sofas, bedroom walls, attics. I am regretting living in a new build, for I want to have an attic, but I would be frightened of the attic because I would think that there was some goblin living up there who wanted to grant me wishes in return for something wicked. So this has been found in an attic, and it has made $325,000 at auction. They apparently belong to a working class vendor in his late 30s. Why was that? Why was that needed? But okay. Who found them while clearing out his mother's home in Portsmouth in the UK. They have been described as moon flasks. They're under 10 inches tall, decorated with images of bats and peaches, both of which hold a special meaning in Chinese culture, with bats representing wealth, virtue, health, happiness, and a peaceful death. Okay. Peaches are associated with the Taoist god of longevity, Xiao Lao. They also stand for health and happiness and are a prominent symbol of spring. Cool. We are told that Chinese pottery has a long history, some showing up at the beginning of the Shang dynasty, generally made from clay, bronze, and ceramic. Traditional wine vessels like the ones found in Portsmouth, known as hu in China, never strayed far from their original design, a pear-shaped body with a narrow neck. Collector's appreciation for Chinese pottery is slightly less ancient, originating during the rule of antiquities collecting Emperor Qianlong in the 18th century. Blue and white porcelain, which first appeared during the Tang dynasty, which is 618 to 906 CE, made using special clay and firing techniques, became sought after by collectors. Apparently, authenticating these vases was easier said than done. Their bases bore the 6-character marking of Qianlong himself. Such markings are, though, frequently found on forgeries, and so it's not enough to prove their legitimacy. Because of the pristine condition of them, they originally thought that these must be modern reproductions worth about £100. It's when the vases were posted online that the initial valuation was called into question. There was apparently an amazing amount of interest in them. And 20 minutes after bidding, they went to a Chinese buyer for $327,000, which was around 2,600 times their valuation. Happiest of all, why do we keep referring to him? This article is referring to him in this way. Happiest of all was the working class vendor who found the vases. That's a really weird, because it was working class they did that, and now it's happened again. That's really weird. Apparently, quote, he's renovating his home and had thought he could not afford to go on holiday this year, but now he can go on multiple times. That's what a weird way to describe somebody. I wonder why they've chosen that. That's really strange. Anyway, that's cool. It is. It is. And it's just such a strange choice. The class's overtones, it's just really, it's icky, right? It makes me feel icky. Yeah, it's poor person makes good. And now look, he's been through our auction house and he can renovate his house and go on his lovely hollybobs. Aren't we good people? The Nelson Atkins Museum is auctioning off an $18 million Monet. That's the lowest estimate. It's between 18 million and 25 million at auction. This is the Moulin de Limits from 1888. It's going to leave the walls of the museum for Christie's 20th century evening sale in New York in May. The museum apparently only partially owns the work. It's going to put its share of the proceeds towards establishing a new acquisition fund. I mean, I don't know. I suppose every museum's different. The Palmer family were behind last year's auction of Moulin de Limits, and Sotheby's estimated that it would command $12 million to $18 million. Ultimately, it went for $25.6 million. It's thought this might be what has inspired this group to sell this painting. The spokesperson for the museum said that while we will miss this beautiful work, the sale is also an opportunity for the museum to create the Joseph S. and Ethel B. Alpha Art Acquisition Endowment. These are the other owners. So the museum owns a bit of it and the Alphas own the other bit of it. There is a hope that this art fund will then, what they will acquire, might identify the Monets of tomorrow. Visitors have been able to enjoy the work in person since 2008, when Nelson Atkins put it on view. Besides this particular version, the museum holds numerous other Monets, including the Boulevard des Capuchins and a work from the Water Lily series. The announcement also notes that, quote, a local Kansas collector is now lending Monet's serene and beautiful Church at Verheul from 1881, ensuring the artist's 1880 works will continue to be available for viewers. Scarlett, I don't know if it's necessarily going to go into private hands, although presumably it's going to, I mean, unless an institution has reason enough to think that this is so special that they are going to fund purchasing it, it's going to be private hands, isn't it? I'll be honest, I read this and I'm still not 100% sure what the implication is going to be going forward for the understanding of these remains. But here it is. Archaeologists are reporting they are now finding microplastics in ancient remains. They have been found in historic soil samples for the first time. They have found them in soil deposits more than 7 meters or 23 feet underground, which were deposited in the 1st or 2nd century CE and excavated in the 1980s. The study identified 16 different microplastic polymer types in contemporary and archive soil samples. Microplastics are pieces of plastic no larger than 5 millimeters, commonly used in beauty products around 2020. Researchers and conservations about their proliferation in the world around us has spiked in recent years. We know there are concerns about the impact of microplastics on the environment and on human health, but apparently they could also force a change in the entire field of archaeology. This article points out, while preserving archaeological remains in situ has been the favoured approach in recent years, new findings trigger a change in approach, as microplastic contamination could compromise the remains' scientific value. I'm not quite sure of why. I understand why they're saying that, but I don't understand. I don't understand why. A professor from the University of York said, "This feels like an important moment, confirming what we should have expected, that what we previously thought to be pristine archaeological deposits ripe for investigation are in fact contaminated with plastics, and this includes deposits sampled and stored in the late 1980s. We're familiar with plastics in the oceans and rivers, but here we see our historical heritage incorporating toxic elements. To what extent this contamination compromised the evidential value of these deposits and their national importance is what we're going to try to find out next." Apparently, some of their best preserved remains, such as Viking finds at Coppergate in York, were in a consistent anaerobic waterlogged environment for over 1,000 years, which preserved organic materials incredibly well. The presence of microplastics can and will change the chemistry of the soil, potentially introducing elements that will cause organic remains to decay. If that is the case, preserving archaeology in situ may no longer be appropriate. This was published in the Science of Total Environment. I'll be honest with you, I don't really understand how microplastics work in that way. I don't doubt for a second that they could cause organic remains to decay. I don't understand how that happens. I don't understand how it happens. But that is a me failing, not necessarily a science failing. If anybody understands microplastics and can explain it to me like I'm 5, then maybe I can then explain it again better next time around. Aurora, thank you very much for the super sticker. That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. So that brings me to the end of the new news. And now we are hopping on to our final ding dong, or our first and only ding dong. And it's nobody being a ding dong, but it is potentially ding dong related. Julesy asks, if there are rust-eating bacteria in the ocean, there could be plastic-eating bacteria in the soil. I mean, I have no idea if that's possible. My scientific understanding is the only thing poorer than my scientific knowledge is my understanding of geography and mathematics. It is woeful. So I have no idea. What's this? Alicia says, Are you aware of the article that talks about how carbon-14 dating is only going to be used for maybe another 30 years? I am not aware of that. Is that more science that I what? That's oh dear. Okay, I haven't seen that. I will go and see if I can find it. Good. Okay. Fortunately, we have other things. We have other things. Right? Right? Do we have other things? We have got them. Oh god, I need to be better at science. I do. I do need to be better at science. That you're right. I mean, Dodge the auctioneer, which sounds like a fully Dickensian character, um, or like something from Shakespeare, like Slug the Joiner, Dodge the auctioneer, could theoretically have been a ding dong too. But here is the ding dong we're talking about today. A fight to protect the dignity of Michelangelo's David raises questions about freedom of expression. And of course, Michelangelo's David has arguably got the most famous ding dong in the world. So the David, completed in 1504. But in the current area of quick buck, curators worry the marble statue's religious and political significance is being diminished by the thousands of refrigerator magnets and other souvenirs that are being sold around Florence. These are being called, by the director of the museum, debasing. In that way, she's a bit of a David herself against the Goliath of unfettered capitalism, with its army of street vendors and souvenir shop operators hawking aprons of the statue's nude figures, T-shirts of it engaged in obscene gestures and ubiquitous figurines, often in pop art neon. The state attorney's office in Florence has launched a series of court cases invoking Italy's landmark cultural heritage code, which protects artistic treasures from disparaging and unauthorized commercial use. The museum in question has won hundreds of thousands of euros or dollars in damages since 2017. I think if you want to position it as the capitalism is Goliath and the museum is David, that's cute, that's sweet. However, if it's individual street vendors and pop artists, they aren't the Goliath. But okay, sweet. Also, if you could take a variety of people to court and earn thousands of euros or dollars, I don't think that you're the David. But okay. I mean, in some ways, I do get the point. I do get the point about, but I also think it's important that things can be parodied, adapted, and altered because that is a way to keep it alive. The stuff, for example, on like TikTok, where you have that filter where you've got old paintings and somebody puts their face into it and they pull, like, that's a reworking of that piece. It could look like mocking, it could feel disparaging, but actually what it's doing for me is it's keeping the artwork alive. It's keeping it relevant. Maybe it's just me though. Legal action is also followed to protect masterpieces other museum, not without debate. That includes Leonardo's Vitruvian Man, Donatello's David, and Botticelli's Birth of Venus, all of which have in many ways become pop culture images with pop culture references. And I think at a certain point, if you take it this seriously, because nobody's defacing the artwork itself, people who are spending their money on this, who are purchasing it, they are doing it because they feel a connection with that piece, and maybe they want to kind of have something that's tongue in cheek in response to it. But the fact that people care enough to spend their money on something that connects to that artwork is really vital for keeping people coming through your doors. as this article says, these decisions raise the questions of whether institutions should be the arbiters of taste, and to what extent freedom of expression is being limited. It raises not just legal issues, but also philosophical issues. What does cultural patrimony mean? How much of a stranglehold do you want to give institutions over ideas and images that are in the public domain? And with what we've talked about either last time or the time before, with the question of whether or not photographing a piece of work means that you have created an image that then you have the capacity to license, when the actual work itself is old enough that it would be under Creative Commons or freely accessible to use. The courts have said that actually a photograph is not enough of original work or change to that work for it to be something that you can therefore charge a license for. I think this is perhaps trying to get it through the back door, that if you're saying it's disparaging, then all of a sudden it becomes something that you can sue for. It's not copyright infringement, but it's basically working in the same way. They point, for example, to Andy Warhol's series inspired by Leonardo's Last Supper. Are we going to prevent artists like Warhol from creating derivative work? And this is the thing. Derivative work is itself a vital part of the artistic conversation. Italy's cultural code is unusual in its scope. It's extending in perpetuity the author's copyright to the museum or the institution that owns it. And I think this is something that we need to be fairly cautious about endorsing whole hog and wholeheartedly. Court cases debated whether Italy's law violates a 2019 European Union directive stating that any artwork no longer protected by copyright falls into the public domain, meaning that, quote, everybody should be free to make, use, and share copies of that work. And I agree. I don't think that a rainbow of miniature Davids is disparaging the work. I don't think that a T-shirt with David blowing a bubblegum bubble is disparaging the work. I think that positioning themselves as David versus Goliath fundamentally misrepresents the power of institutions like this and their backers and the individuals that sit on their boards, because I have no doubt, I don't know who sits on the board of this, but I know who sits on the boards of other museums, and they are always the Goliath. I wonder, are they annoyed? Because if the museum gift shop was selling David paperweights and David fridge magnets, I wouldn't. Does the Louvre sell Mona Lisa magnets? Probably right. I mean, the British Museum sells replica Rosetta Stones. Doesn't want to give the original, but I can put a replica in their museum. But hey ho, I think everyone's being a ding dong here. Lots of ding dongs. Now, friends, we're going on to events and exhibitions. First up, if you're in New York, then we have got this exhibition, Beatrix Potter Drawn to Nature. This is part of a touring exhibition created by the V&A. So if you like your Beatrix Potter and you want to have a little walk down memory lane with it, maybe take your little ones down there and show it off. This is going to be open until June the 9th. So you've still got a couple of months to check it out. If you do go and see it, as always, let me know what you think. Next up, and I should also say, where these are physical exhibitions, and I say that because there are a couple of online resources I want to show you. Where these are physical exhibitions, I have included information about the accessibility of those museums. So in the description box, you will see a link to purchase tickets for the exhibition, and beneath it you will find the accessibility information should you need to use that and make use of that information. This is an online resource. They have put together a Victorian illustrated Shakespeare archive. This is an archive of the illustrations from Victorian Shakespeare versions for each play, and what those illustrations are play by play. So that is, I mean, I was checking it out, and these are beautiful illustrations, really worth a look, really informative about how these individuals, how they were visualizing Shakespeare. I think it's, if anybody's working on particular plays, I think it could be very useful as part of the history of those texts in performance. So definitely worth checking out there. Last time we talked about the finds at Must Farm. This is the Bronze Age settlement. It's the one that is known as the Pompeii of the UK. There's an exhibition of it at the Peterborough Museum and Art Gallery that is going to open on the 27th of April 2024, so in 19 days. That must work. And it's going to stay open until the 28th of September 2024, so just after my birthday. And it looks like this is a whole bunch of finds. This is a free exhibition to go and check out, and telling the stories of a Bronze Age settlement that was abandoned suddenly following a catastrophic fire. So I want to go and check that out. So, and if anybody goes, do let me know what you think. We have got the Stone of Destiny, also known as the Stone of Scone, which used to sit beneath the throne, the coronation throne in Westminster Abbey. I believe it was brought down for the coronation of King Charles III. This is now on display at the Perth Museum in Scotland. If you want to go to the Stone of Destiny experience, which sounds very cool, then tickets are released, we're told here, every Monday at 10 a.m. And they're released in 20 batches up to 14 days in advance of your visit. Tickets are timed at 10-minute intervals, and so booking in advance is recommended to guarantee your spot. They do say that they welcome wheelchair and mobility scooter users in the experience, but buggies and large bags cannot be accommodated. You also can't use any photography or videography. So if anybody gets a chance to check that out, I don't see an end date, so I think it's ongoing. Let me know what you think if you make your way there. Another online exhibition. This is the virtual record of the Treasury of Ireland, which was destroyed in 1922. So it's a virtual reconstruction that you can check out and move around in. So that is really cool. I'm very interested by the way that virtual reality and augmented reality is going to change the way we do heritage. It's still very much in its infancy, but already in the last kind of 5 to 10 years, it's coming on leaps and bounds. So I think that in the not too distant future, we are going to see some truly, what will today for us feel absolutely mind-blowing that we can achieve with these sorts of things. And I know that, for example, AI is very controversial, but I'm interested in playing with it some more, because I think AI, VR, augmented reality, I'm very interested to see where that can go. So hold on to your butts because I might be doing some more AI inspired, chat GPT inspired videos. I want to play with it some more and put it into the content, because I think that there are really unethical ways to use it, and it's still very much the Wild West. But I want to be a person that uses it in a way that is ethical. Unfortunately, with my husband, who in the work he does, he is working very much at the moment on the ethics and the problems and the concerns surrounding things like AI software and ChatGPT. So in terms of having somebody to guide me through it, I feel like I've got someone who is understanding the ethical implications in ways that I wouldn't. So I'm very, very grateful for that. Alicia says you posted a link about the C14 dating. Want to make sure you saw it. I didn't. And sometimes links, if you share them in the chat, they only show up for you. It won't let you post links on other people's pages anymore. So if you could email that to me, which is reading the past with Dr. Cat at gmail.com, then I can see it. But it might be showing it to you, but it won't be showing it to me. Anyone going to Amsterdam or in Amsterdam, then you can check out this exhibition, Face to Face, the people behind the mummy portraits. We talked about the discovery of these portraits months ago, and now they are on display in this exhibition. And it opened on the 6th of October, and it's going to be running to the 20th of May. Unless that means it's going to open on the 6th of October and run to the 20th of May. It doesn't have a year. I'm assuming it means it's already open because you can buy tickets. It would be weird to not have a date if they mean October 2024. So I'm assuming they mean it opened in 2023, although that's not explicit in this in this particular advert for it. But it does look really interesting. So if you are going to be in Amsterdam and you get a chance to see this, do let me know what you think. Our final event is a shameless plug for myself. If you've ever wanted to see me speak in person, then I am going to be speaking on the 28th of July, which is a Sunday, at 1:30 p.m. And I'm going to be at Harvington Hall. There are a whole bunch of fascinating talks going on with really cool historians. So if you are going to be around between the 24th and 28th of July, then here I am. And hopefully this is going to be the start of more getting out in person and doing speaking engagements and things like that. It's always a little bit tricky when you've got a little one to do these kinds of trips and to get out and about. But I'm looking forward to this, and hopefully it's going to be the start of me doing more stuff like this and getting a chance to meet you lovely lot if you can make it. And if it goes really, really well, then, you know, maybe I can come to where you are, wherever that may be, do a little tour around the world, not licking the history. That's what I'll call it. Brian, did I end up checking out the new series Mary and George? I still haven't had a chance. I am still trying to find the time to watch the last episode of Call the Midwife. I am barely watching any TV, mostly because when I sit down in my living room to watch TV, there is a small human who wants to watch Moana, The Lion King, or Frozen for the umpteenth hundredth time. So I don't get a chance to watch what I want to watch because we're too busy. Let it go until I want to rip my eyeballs out. Good times. But yes, I do want to check out that show because it does it really cool. And I've also been sent by a lovely friend in the States. I have been sent some of the press and promo stuff from it. So I want to do a good look into it when I get the chance. When Scarlett, when he is in bed, I am also in bed, or I'm doing this. So when he's in bed, I'm asleep because I'm old and I'm tired. Jessie, you are, to my knowledge, lots of the parks in and around London lock at night, and free camping or kind of secret camping They do frown upon that. You need, for the most part, around here, you would need to be in a campsite. Alas. So that's what I have for you. As always, all of the stuff we've talked about is linked in the description box. And Rumpelstiltskin Stubbuckle, you have Renaissance fairs in Colorado. I want to come to a Renaissance fair so much I can taste it. Like when I see all of the fun costumes that people are wearing, I saw the stuff for Venice Carnival that a bunch of American reenactors and costumiers are putting together, and it was just gorgeous. I loved it so much. Yeah, I need to earn enough money to come on an American tour. I just go from one Renaissance fair to the next. It's gonna be good. Yeah, that'll be cool. Wheezy Squeezebox, are there many hostels around London? There must be. I mean, I'm a Londoner, so I've never used them. But I imagine there must be some, like, because in Edinburgh you've got like youth hostels, YMCA hospitals, YMCA hostels, etc. There must be the same thing in London. There must be. Right, friends, that's what I have for you. We've been going for nearly 3 hours. These don't get shorter. I always tell myself that I'm going to stop babbling, but I never do. I mean, the best lies are the lies we tell ourselves, are they not? Right. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for sticking with me. If you're watching on the playback, thank you for taking the time. I am looking forward to seeing some of you on Wednesday night for History After Dark. I'm looking forward to hopefully chatting with others of you or the same group of you when it comes to my premiere live chat for Friday's video. It's been a topic that I've been requesting a number of times, and we are talking about him this Friday. And I hope wherever you are in your Monday or maybe your Tuesday, you are having a wonderful week so far. And the rest of your week will also be wonderful. If you did manage to see any of the eclipse, I hope it was wonderful for you and that you protected your little eyeballs. I am looking forward to seeing your thoughts on the news items we talked about and also to chatting with you in future videos. I do hope that you are going to have a great rest of your week. But for now, from me, it's going to be bye-bye. Do take care of yourselves. Bye.